Gen that was. The gen that was.
The gen that was.
The gen that was.
The gen that was.
This is the gen that was. Hello, everybody. Very special welcome to the Gen That Was, a brand new show that we're doing where I will take three other allies through every single year of the PS4 and Xbox One from 2013 to 2020. Every single episode will focus on a different year. So for this very first episode, we are focusing on the launch year 2013. Here with me to talk about this momentous time is Daniel Bloodworth.
Hello.
Michael Huber.
Hello.
And Bradley Ellis.
Yo.
To kind of give you an idea of what this show is going to be and how it's structured. So as I mentioned, we'll be talking about every single year, but we will be specifically focusing on the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. We won't be talking about the PC, we won't be talking about the Wii U, we won't be talking about the Switch, we won't be talking about handhelds. It really is just focused on the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One to kind of give us a very focused journey as we head towards the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. But what else I want to say is the structure of the show. So the first part is going to be context. So for these episodes, unfortunately, we're not going to do like an exhaustive analysis of every single thing that happened in the year. It's just going to be kind of a snapshot. It's just going to be something that kind of puts us back in that time. We're going to be focusing on kind of the biggest moments that affected these consoles each year. Then the next part of the show, I've selected 5 games that I think will kind of represent the generation. And we'll talk about them. We'll see how much we remember, if our feelings have changed from, when we played them or when they came out to now. And then we're going to put our money where our mouth is in the third part, where we'll be playing one of the big 5 and kind of just reacting to it live at the very end. And I'm very excited about the game that I've selected to play for this first episode. But with all of that out of the way, all that preamble, let's talk about 2013, the launch year of the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4. And I knew this, of course, going in, but as I was doing research, it really just hit me over the head how rough of a year this was for Microsoft. Mm-hmm. And the reason why it was such a rough year for Microsoft is there was confusion, there were rumors, there were vague statements about what the Xbox One was going to demand and how it was going to implement certain policies. So there was confusion over the Xbox One needing to be always online, and then that was kind of redirected to Phil Harrison saying, hey, I think you just need to check in once every 24 hours. And just this alone caused quite a bit of uproar.
Check in.
Yeah. You'll need to authenticate once every 24 hours.
It's like checking in with a parent.
Yeah.
It's like calling them when you're out or something.
Hey,
like,
still here.
Yeah.
Can you guys put yourself back at that time where there were kind of these articles coming out about the Xbox One and what it was going to be like? And how you felt about it?
Yeah, man. Like, I even just remember their, reveal of the console. And, the main takeaway from it was TV. TV, 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 TV. Don't, the games will kind of be there. But the real focus is, making this your all-in-one entertainment system, baby.
Yeah, the One. That's why it's called the One, is because it's supposed to be, everything happens through that. That's why it's this strange box that actually has, an HDMI in on it, because they wanted you to just change the channels and do everything from there. I know you said you weren't going to talk about the Wii U, but the Wii U tried to do the same thing with their TV remote control app, and it's so funny to think that companies were really trying to do this convergence thing to where, hey, if you're turning on the TV, you're turning on the Xbox.
Well, not not just trying to make it an all-in-one entertainment system, but the way in which you do those tasks, they were really pushing Kinect, and that was a big feature of the Xbox One.
Kinect,
especially at launch, is all of the voice commands that you can do with Kinect and the Xbox One. And going back and reading the IGN interview or review for the Xbox One, something the reviewer says is like, "Hey, I'll never, use other things. Like I'll use voice commands because it's so much easier." And so it's definitely something that some people latched onto. But yeah, it being an all-in-one entertainment system was definitely a big focus.
Yeah, and that I remember that definitely putting me off, because it's like, I'm just here for the games. I don't want to get roped into ESPN and Kinect. So that lack of focus, it's like they're hyper focused on that, but to me it's like a lack of focus. So I think if you were into like motion Kinect stuff and you wanted the all-in-one and you like needed TV subscriptions, like I could see that being appealing. But I was like, I'm just here for the games, man. I don't need cable. I don't need cable TV.
It's very funny because going back to this time, it feels like everyone was just trying to give you the coolest way to watch Game of Thrones that they possibly could. Like that was really their objective. I think the reason why this authentication was such a sticking point for people and kind of created an us versus them scenario is you have to remember that this was right around the time of the SimCity debacle. This wasn't too long after Diablo 3 either, and that whole travesty of a launch. And then you also had things like EA. Do you remember when they used to have those codes that you needed? Those like online multiplayer codes
Dead
that you would
Space
need to enter?
Oh yeah,
Yep.
dude,
Yeah.
wow. Yep.
And
Dude, man, you're bringing me back, man. This is crazy.
that's the whole point of the show.
It's working.
Yeah. So
it wasn't just for multiplayer too, right? Like
the online pass.
Yeah, but like wasn't the Catwoman thing sort of tied into that with Batman? Like if you got the disc, you'd have to get the code.
Good call.
So they're trying to like keep people from reselling games. They were really fighting against GameStop at that point. And yeah, it's hilarious because like Microsoft's approach to that was, hey, we're gonna like really focus on digital. We're gonna make it so that you don't. I think that's the thing is they were trying to make it so you sort of don't need the discs, and they're talking about the disc just being a key, and that was like part of the online access.
They had used game restrictions basically, where if you gave your game to somebody else, the idea was that you might have to pay a fee in order to use that game. And they were also potentially going to allow publishers to set their own rules regarding the resale of games. And so depending on which publisher you're dealing with, you might have different restrictions when it comes to how you trade a game in. And I think what's even more frustrating about all of this is they were very nondescript on how all of this was going to work. And even at E3, they didn't directly tackle a lot of the concerns and reports and rumors that were going around. And so there was a lot of concern over what the system was going to be and how it was going to affect you as a consumer. And they certainly didn't make it any better because they had people like Microsoft Studios creative director Adam Orth just tweeting the absolute dumbest bullshit. Some sample tweets include, "Sorry, I don't get the drama over having an always-on console." And he used a "deal with it" hashtag, which just seems very pretentious. Wow. He also said, "Sometimes the electricity goes out. I will not purchase a vacuum cleaner." Just like, holier than thou, like really far removed from any sort of reality.
Must be nice.
And then it was this idea that pretty much everyone is going to be online, and if you're not, then you're not. Yeah, you don't even really deserve the console in a way, right? So I remember the one quote that everybody reacted to being that like, hey, if you want to play offline, we have the Xbox 360.
Yeah, that was actually an E3 interview with Jeff Keighley in 2013, where Don Matrick says, "Fortunately, we have a product for people who aren't able to get some form of connectivity. It's called the Xbox 360.
So condescending. Holy shit.
None of these people are talking at Microsoft anymore. Like, they're either gone, long gone, or they just are, they're not front and center.
Yeah, and it will actually be really exciting in this show to kind of see the evolution and how the messaging at Microsoft has changed over time, because it has changed dramatically. But going back to 2013, they just seem so disconnected with what the audience wants, and when they're met with that resistance, they seem to just downplay it. In the same interview with Don Matrick, Jeff is like, hey, did you expect this? Like, did you expect to get this kind of feedback? And he's like, yeah, gamers are passionate. And it's just like, it's completely hand-wavy and dismissive and just immensely frustrating to see.
Well, and then with all of that, like, the disconnection comes back to the Kinect, right? Because the reason that the Xbox One was $500 is because they made the Kinect mandatory. It was in every box at launch. And it's crazy to think it essentially was the worst point in time for that technology. Because if you go back to the Xbox 360, the Kinect that they sold was wildly successful. Most of the general gaming audience, the people that watch Easy Allies and game trailers and all that, didn't pay a whole lot of attention to it. But a lot of the same people that jumped on the Wii that didn't play games as often were jumping on the Kinect. They were into Just Dance. They were into Star Wars and Disneyland, and like a lot of these games are successful. And then by the time the Xbox One came around, all of that dried up. There is very little actual Kinect game support for the Xbox One, even in the first couple of years. And those features like facial recognition and voice commands, which even, I don't know if you remember this, but the PS4, were like some of those launch games were including like voice command options and stuff using the microphone, the camera, the camera you buy separately. And all of that stuff faded away from the consoles, but then essentially came back with a vengeance with stuff like Alexa. And so it just sort of like was the wrong moment for that technology.
I can remember waiting. I was like, I'm not buying the Kinect.
Yeah.
I'm waiting until this thing is not part of it. I want no part of it.
I waited too.
Blood, you talk about the Kinect and how it was kind of born out of this chasing after the Wii and its success. And I think the other thing sort of going into this generation is you talk about it drying up, but I feel like motion controls and the ire that kind of they sparked had a lot to do with just burnout. I mean, that was kind of an exhausting time because it felt like everybody was trying to chase after this dragon, this motion control, thing and capitalize that on as hard as possible. But they weren't doing that with a ton of quality in most instances.
Right.
Like, a lot of it was just a giant joke, right? And the Kinect was part of that, right? The Kinect never really felt like it fully capitalized on what it was trying to sell. And I think Milo was a good example of that. I think
used before, but yeah.
Yeah, I think
it's crazy.
I think Kinect Star Wars is a good example of that. Like things that just became absolute jokes, right? And it's not just Microsoft that is guilty of that, but trying to make a case for Kinect at the launch of your new console, when I think a lot of people are sick of it, is a hard sell. And there are definitely people who swear by the voice commands of the Xbox One, but I still think that is an uphill battle considering what came before. Sony responded fiercely in several different ways when it came to their own E3 presentation and what they shared. But one of the biggest ways is that the PS4 is launching at $399. The Xbox One is launching at $499. Just gigantic.
Like, huge.
Yeah.
It's like at that exact moment, there's no question. If you were on the fence at all. Unless you're like a diehard Microsoft guy or a diehard Sony person, whatever. If you were on the fence, I think $100, 20% price difference is the pushing of the wind to that side.
Particularly if you clearly see that the $100 difference is for a Kinect that you don't want.
Yeah.
And it was also pretty clear right from the outset that the Xbox itself was underpowered in comparison to the PS4.
Mm-hmm.
Not by a giant margin, obviously. Like, we didn't see that much of a difference in the games that came out on those systems, particularly in comparison to the generation before, with all the struggles people had with the PS3. But it was enough there to where, like, why would I pay $100 more for a less powerful machine? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's not even that. That's part of it. But, like, a thing that for me was at the time was, like, I wasn't in the game industry or anything like that. So $100 was definitely something. And I wasn't just, like, the idea of, like, this machine, they're focusing it so much more on TV and, like, Kinect and, like, whatever, this all-inclusive. But the PlayStation is just more, like, your focused, dedicated game console. And that was what I wanted out of a system. I was like, yeah, that's fine, but I want these killer games that are going to eventually come, because we had Sony's first party also, like, definitely ramping up at that phase too, and the promise of what was to come.
To say something positive, though, they also announced Killer Instinct officially at E3 2013.
Nice.
And Phil Spencer is getting on stage and he's saying, like, hey, you wanted it and we listened. And Killer Instinct at launch was definitely not the full Killer Instinct experience, but I think, using the information that we have now, I unfortunately did not play a lot of Killer Instinct, but just seeing the response that it has generated from the hardcore fans and the people who really appreciate it, like, they really won people over, and they aggressively supported that game for years. And so, we're criticizing a lot of what Microsoft did, but that is something where I'm like, they handled this well. They did what people wanted, and I do have to commend them for that.
I think that there's some hesitation on that, though, because I think that the model that they went for, which probably worked out in the long run and was somewhat forward-thinking in terms of, like, where a lot of games have gone since then, particularly fighting games, I think at that time it was still really foreign to people.
Yes. Oh, yes.
And I think that it came across as being not a real game, not a finished game, not a serious game, that, like, they're almost like they kind of half-heartedly put it out there when they really were just trying something very different. And I think, like, on a personal level, I think Killer Instinct is the biggest thing that I missed out on by not getting an Xbox at launch, because I was a huge Killer Instinct fan back in the day. I put a ton of time into the N64 game in particular, and had played a lot of that with friends. And so by the time I eventually came around to getting my own Xbox at home, then I had so many other things to catch up on that, like, Killer Instinct was then just kind of out of my mind.
Yeah, I think the difference there, Ben, is, like, you've talked about Kinect and everything, and it's like Microsoft was setting up all these things for long term, and then Killer Instinct was the one thing that, like, lasted the marathon.
Right, and there's so many things that you're saying that I think are accurate, because part of the reason that I missed out on Killer Instinct, right, is I didn't want to spend $4.99 at launch for an Xbox One, and so I just kind of missed the opening kind of bit for Killer Instinct and then didn't follow back up with it. And Blood, you are totally right that model was foreign to people at the time and heavily criticized in a way that I just don't think the conversation around it would be the same if it happened today. Because even I've actually watched the Game Trailer's launch report for Killer Instinct, and that is exactly what was said, where they're like, this game is extremely fun to play, but at 6 characters with, like, it almost nothing single player and really, lacking in features multiplayer, like, it was just almost dismissive of it and that model, because I think it was foreign at the time. And I think the point that I'm just trying to emphasize is Killer Instinct didn't end there, right? Like, we
Right.
are talking about it in the context of 2013, and I do think that was the response, but it grew and evolved so much over, the next several years. Sony's response to this was just going back to it. It couldn't have been handled better. So one of the things that I think sort of crystallizes Sony's response to this is there is a video where Shuhei Yoshida, it's on the official PlayStation channel. You can still go watch it. It's got millions of views. It's extremely short. It's called Official PlayStation Used Game Instructional Video. Shuhei Yoshida hands Adam Boyes a copy of Killzone Shadowfall to show how easy it is to share games with friends. That was it. And I think really to Sony's credit, they sort of took the vagueness of what Microsoft was doing and just responded with, we're not going to do that. And something that they did at E3 was a strategy is they're like, hey, the way that you're used to things, it's going to be like that. Used games, it's going to be the same. And so it was really a comfort play.
They were speaking to the people, Ben.
Yeah.
You have $100 less. You can use used games. They painted Microsoft as this big corporation, must be nice. And then Sony's over there just, hey, we're cheaper. You can share your games. Come on in. We welcome everyone. So it was a smart video. It was a smart move.
Yeah, they definitely felt more in touch with their fan base than Microsoft.
They kept the message simple. Maybe some would say too simple, but I really think that worked in their benefit, where they were basically like, we're the good guys, they're the bad guys. Everything that they're doing that you don't like, we're not doing. And, of course it wasn't that straightforward and simple. I'm not trying to say that Sony is your friend, but they were definitely trying to position themselves that way.
Yeah, that E3, it absolutely, it turned everything around, because it shouldn't be missed that the previous generation, at least in North America, 360 was ahead by far. 360 was seen as the default in terms of, what publishers were pushing, in terms of what like a lot of people were playing. Like Xbox Live had really steamrolled and achievements as well had steamrolled what the PlayStation 3 had done. And so Sony was spending a lot of time catching up to what people wanted out of particularly online systems and relationships and all of that kind of thing with their consoles. And, Call of Duty was, that was an Xbox game for pretty much. It was always, all that stuff was coming out early on Xbox. It was in every Xbox press conference. And so when Sony made this shift and pretty much won over everybody, that E3 was the moment that, shifted the direction of the generation. Like the whole generation rested on that in a way that pretty much, I don't know that any other generation has had that kind of a moment. Like that kind of pace setting spot where like it's all out from here, and Xbox has caught up and has, pretty much put themselves on equal ground since then. But like with the previous generation, with Sony taking that time, it took most of the generation to get there.
Yeah, Bloodworth, I remember the 360 version compared to the PS3 version of so many games. The 360 version
Always
would just
better.
run better.
Yes.
And I didn't have a 360 for a while, so that was a little frustrating.
Yeah, talking about the 360, it seemed like as things were happening, Microsoft was there to kind of propel whatever was happening forward in a very big way. I mean, generally, especially at the beginning, like Xbox Live was just considered a better service. Like it was just
way better.
Easier and better to play online games. Like the infrastructure that it had, the way just everything worked, like getting in a party with friends. It was just, and it felt like forward thinking and accommodating in a way that people really latched onto. And you have to keep in mind, like, this is the generation where you had Call of Duty Modern Warfare and multiplayer gaming on console blowing up in a big way. And going beyond that, the way that Microsoft highlighted indie games and Xbox Live Arcade, it was really incredible. And I think super facilitated the rise of indie games and the way that we understand them today. And so it's bizarre almost. I mean, it's funny because there are certainly things to criticize about the Xbox 360. Like, you could just talk all day about how stupid Microsoft points are. Something that they did announce in 2013 that they were getting rid of. But
wow.
Yeah. I think the point that I'm trying to make is the 360 felt like forward thinking and in tune with where things were going. And the Xbox One, I think the best way that I can sum it up, especially going and revisiting these fucking suits talking to people, is it's like, we're going to do this, and the audience is like, please don't, and they're like, no, we're doing this. And there just seems to be this combativeness that is really ugly. To Microsoft's credit, right, a lot of what we're talking about, they after E3, they pulled back, and they're like, hey, we heard you.
Yeah.
And that feels so disingenuous, where it's like, no, you're getting crushed. And obviously you did not have to be connected to play Xbox One games. And obviously you didn't have to worry about weird publisher restrictions when it came to reselling games. You could just resell games as you were used to reselling them.
Better late than never, I say. It's like, okay, they saw what was happening and they pivoted.
Well, to their credit, after the Sony E3 happened, it wasn't like it was months later. You know, it was a pretty quick response to what was going on. But I think ultimately the damage had been done. And I think going through those console launches, it felt like that. Like, you know, when those things were coming out, it still felt like Microsoft had done too much damage to themselves.
Yeah, man. Like, everyone, like, after that, everyone was on board for PS4. Like, majority of people were like, I'm getting a PS4 line in the sand is drawn. Like, I don't trust Microsoft. And it took years for them to get, like, that kind of trust back.
I think that is going to do it for the first part of this episode. So we will be talking about 5 big games of 2013, trying to pick them apart to the best of our memory. And yeah, look forward to that in the next segment. All right, hello everybody. Welcome to part 2 of the Gen That Was. We're going to be talking about 5 games from 2013 that I think kind of maybe not paint a complete picture of what the year was like, but give a somewhat accurate representation. And I thought the game that we would start with is not the biggest, but it definitely left an impression on people, or at least that's the sense that I get. And you could see it right now. That is Resogun. Panel, friends, colleagues, what do you think of Resogun?
Love
became
it.
the surprise hit, really. Like, it's the thing that you kept coming back to, kept you hooked. I feel like in a lot of ways, you know, like we've been talking about Hades the past few weeks, and it really has that same kind of vibe to where you keep coming back to it, you keep getting better, and in its own way, it still is a visual showpiece with the amount of particles and stuff on screen, and the compression from video just doesn't do it the same kind of justice as when you play it in person. But it's one of those things that anytime I would bring my PS4 to a group or a party or something, it was like, Resogun, you guys have to see Resogun. Like, it was just one of those talking points.
Blood, I think that's one of my favorite things about getting a new console is when you like have people over, or like you just want to show them something where it's like it's like you get that brand new toy and you just want to share it with somebody. You just want to be like, come take part in this with me.
This was definitely the game I played the most because you can just hop in and have such a good time.
It's interesting. For a lot of these games, I went back and watched the review at the time, and Justin Spear did the review of Resogun. Shout out to Justin Spear. And he had a lot of great things to say about it. A criticism that he had, I'm curious if you guys have the same thing, because I was thinking about it, and I was just struggling to remember Resogun, despite the general sentiment of enjoying it. But something he said is that there are 5 levels, and like it's a great time, but it very quickly becomes a known quantity, where you kind of get to a point where you're like, oh, I get it, and I've seen it, and I feel like I'm doing similar things. Was that an issue for you guys playing Resogun?
Yeah, I could kind of see that. I definitely played it a lot when it first came out. You know, I mean, like Huber said, it's just so easy to just hop in for a few rounds. But after like 2 weeks or so, I kind of just slowly started to burn off on it because it started to feel the same to me. Like, obviously, it was super fun. I really loved it, but I kind of agree with Justin on that.
Sure.
For sure. And it's compounded by being a launch game, I feel like, too. You know, the expectations are maybe a little higher, maybe a little more critical of...
Right.
You know, a reason...
That's a great point, Huber.
Like a reason to buy a next-gen system. You know, we're going to hold these games to a little higher standard because it's like, well, could this have been on last gen? Do I really need to buy a $400 or $500 system to play this specific game? So those are all definitely factors.
I think to me it was actually kind of the opposite. Like, this isn't a game that I was expecting to be a talking point for the PS4. It was just, again, it was the freebie, right? Like you were saying, if you had PlayStation Plus, you know, we were used to getting a bunch of older games, but then to get, there's a brand new PlayStation 4 game. So, you know, I just got this system. I want all the games I can get my hands on, so it's great to have an extra one. And then this ended up being so excellent. And I felt like because I didn't have those expectations on it for, you know, compared to something that I would have purchased, it was something that easily kept me coming back. And, you know, again, like I would play through Killzone and then take a break and play some more Resogun and just like felt like this was the thing that was drawing me more into what was going on than any of the big actual AAA games.
I feel like a lot of times, especially when it comes to next gen, there is certainly a bias towards, you know, cinematic games. And I think that's a shame, and I think that can be a little bit claustrophobic at times. And I appreciate when something like this comes out and is positively received. Out of all of the games that we're going to be talking about in this next section, I think Resogun is the one where I'm like, man, I would love to pop back into that for a little bit.
Yeah, totally.
I have that strong sense.
The thing that this reminded me of, though, that we didn't really talk about in the last section is, you know, we're talking about this is a PlayStation Plus game.
Yep.
And, you know, PlayStation Plus, it started out as, you know, the game club, essentially. You know, like you got it because you got those extra games every month. And when PlayStation was doing all those great positive PR moves, they also slipped in that PlayStation Plus will now be required for multiplayer. And it just went right under the radar for a lot of people, at least in terms of sentiment. Like, people knew, people weren't happy about that, but they were so unhappy with Microsoft that it just went right through.
All right, so the next game we're going to be talking about is Dead Rising 3. And I think for a lot of people, and correct me if you disagree, Michael Huber, but I think for a lot of people, this is kind of the beginning of the end for Dead Rising. And I actually remember enjoying this game quite a bit. I reviewed this. We're actually watching my Game Trailers review of Dead Rising 3. This. Yeah, and I had a good time. I don't like it as much as the other two Dead Rising games, but I thought it was a little bit unfairly maligned. However, watching footage of it, that makes sense. Like, all the style on the outside, I think when you dig deeper and you unlock more things, you kind of get into the gameplay and the outfits, you can kind of see that in this footage. There is some of that inherent Dead Rising goofiness there, but when you're watching a lot of the footage, it just looks like gray, generic, like AAA bullshit.
Like, it looks like a Gears of War color palette almost.
Yeah, and I think that some of the artistic decisions for this game really hurt it a lot.
For me, at least, it's kind of the opposite of Killzone, where Killzone went with like a more colorful vibe that turned me off, but then this one went darker, which turned me off. And it's like, I don't know if that's I don't know what's going on with my brain there, but like the original Dead Rising and Dead Rising 2 are so goofy and colorful, and this one was just like hyper serious.
I think that's fine, Huber. Like, that's what Dead Rising was to me. The first one especially, it's like, it's colorful, it's goofy. Like, yeah, there's some like intense stuff in it, but when you just look at this game, it feels like it's disconnected almost from the other two. Besides the name, it was a completely different studio too, wasn't it?
No,
was it the guys that made 2?
Yeah, it was the guys that made 2 as well. Yeah.
Okay, so I didn't like 2 as much as 1.
Same.
But so this looks like it just continued that trend of what I didn't enjoy about Dead Rising sequels.
Yeah, I think as you see me running around in a Servbot helmet, I do think that goofiness is there, and I think they made some smart decisions. I just, like, you go and you watch the E3 2013 Microsoft conference, and how they're choosing to show it, it's like you can barely tell it's Dead Rising. I do think, rewatching my review, I do think there are some good things that they added. So I think it's kind of cool that you don't only have combo weapons, but you have combo vehicles that you can make, which is kind of cool. And I do remember, like, just the density of the zombies being really impressive. Like, just plowing through them on a street was really fun.
Looking back on it, it's good. It's a good game.
It's not Dead Rising 4.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
When I look at this game, I haven't played this game, but I was going to say the setting is a big part of Dead Rising to me.
That's a great
point.
point.
Like the least appealing setting out of the two that I played.
Right.
Yeah, the city is not memorable at all in the slightest. You know, on paper, it's a smart move. You go from the malls to a big open, you know, we're next gen, Dead Rising 3, like, let's go bigger. And it's like, bigger is not always better. Like, this is a textbook example of, you know, just blowing it up, which makes sense, but there's something about the small, intimate nature of the malls that are lost here.
So I agree and disagree. I think visually you're absolutely 100% right. Like, it's just less distinct than the other Dead Rising settings. And I think those settings were a huge part of the appeal of both those games. I will say practically, though, the increase in size does manifest itself, or at least I remember it manifesting itself in a gameplay way pretty interestingly. Like, you do feel more vulnerable. You do feel like you are constantly under threat at all times, and going from one place to another and just being constantly surrounded by a horde. These are feelings that I think were generated in the first two Dead Rising games, but I think it comes across more constantly because of the more open nature. And so I think in a moment-to-moment sense, it does happen in Dead Rising 3, and it's not a completely wasted transition, even though it's less visually distinct, as you guys brought up. All right, so the next game that we're going to talk about, I know you guys, I don't really have super strong feelings on it, but I know you guys, some of you guys at least, are quite a big fan, and that is Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, a game that Don Casanova actually brought to the Hall of Greats. 2013 game. So what is it about Assassin's Creed? What are there, a zillion Assassin's Creed games at this point?
Yes.
What is it that makes this one stand out?
Pirates!
Pirates and the ship mechanics overall. I think we're probably looking at the 360 version of this, most likely, for the review footage, because this is actually one of the few really standout cross-gen games where I think people were waiting to play it in some instances because they wanted to get that next-gen version. The foliage in particular was a lot different and better on the new consoles. And yeah, I think this is a game where a lot of people actually didn't even really need it to be Assassin's Creed. Like, there's just so much with the piracy and the ship combat and everything that was going on and the exploration and just traversing over the seas and the waves. There was nothing else that was really like it. It really stands out apart from the rest of the series, I think, just for that.
Yeah, like they experimented with ships in 3 a little, I remember, but when I look back on this game, it's like what Blober said, is I don't look back on it for the Assassin's Creed elements about it. To me, it was just finally an open world pirate game, actually, where you could sail around with your crew, you got your ship, you can go on some islands, find some treasure. It's something I've been waiting for forever.
Totally. I agree 100%. It's funny because as time has gone on in that series, they've tied it more together. Like, we get some really cool Assassin's Creed Syndicate connections to Kenway, which is really cool. But yeah, at the time, you know, Desmond's trilogy had wrapped up. It felt like a new, fresh start. Like, obviously it was tied to what had come before it, but not as much. You know, your Hatham's relative, and there are family connections, but it still felt like this is just an awesome pirate game.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but the general sense that I got is that the real world story was not that consequential here.
It was not, and it was actually kind of
time.
bad. Like, you're walking around in first person in, like, Abstergo offices, which were kind of, like, they had become, like, a game company at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going around, like, there's a lot of things that were, like, really stretching, like, the fourth wall. You would see marketing materials for different Assassin's Creed games. They were... Yeah, it was like they were taking the Animus and turning it into a product, and it just felt really strange and very disconnected from the momentum the story had before. And so I think this is the first time where the series stopped being about this continuous storyline and turned into, you know what, we're just going to make a period story. It's going to be cool. We'll throw in some Assassin's Creed stuff on the side, but we're just going to take this era and run with it.
Yeah, especially at the time, for sure. Again, a lot of this stuff has been expanded upon in the newer games and the comics and whatever the hell, you know, expanded Assassin's Creed universe, but 100% at the time it felt disconnected.
But yeah, it's like looking at the vistas of like going through the waves and the storms,
It looks
vibes.
beautiful even now, yeah.
The collecting the shanties was so brilliant. It's like got to be the best Assassin's Creed collectible because you get these shanty pages and then you're just rolling along and your crew starts singing, you know, and a lot of these are based on like real pirate shanties and stuff that people, you know, would recognize from history. And yeah, going in and taking ships and fighting off these legendary ships, and there's just so much about it that is really, again, it's like it you don't have to be an Assassin's Creed fan to enjoy it and enjoy this world.
And such an addicting upgrade system in this one, because you're upgrading Edward, you're upgrading your ship, and you're upgrading your town later on. So there was just so much to explore and discover, and it all had a payoff because it was all like working towards something, you know?
You can tell how much
Like
upgrading towns means to you just by the way that you said town.
Yes. And the ship, like upgrading the ship was really important because some of those missions were really difficult. So it really did matter, like upgrading that stuff.
It like sometimes I feel like Assassin's Creed kind of struggles with upgrades and them mattering, but I felt like the ship was really strong, actually, like you're saying, Hubert, because it is so important, and stuff can be real hard if you're not careful.
One of the things, too, that stands out to me is it's one of the better implementations of those, like, kind of side games that they had going on. I don't think they've quite done these sorts of things for a while, but the whole idea of building up a fleet and sending them off to different missions and bringing back resources. And then, you know, they tied that into the whole second screen fad that basically...
Dude, I did that on my phone. I was addicted, Bloodworth.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Go ahead.
That and, like, what they had initially done with Brotherhood, like, those are, to me, like, the two best examples of Assassin's Creed doing these things. Whereas a lot of other times, it just felt like filler.
All right, now we're going to talk about a technical showpiece for the Xbox One, Crytek, and that is Rise, Son of Rome.
Lord Vader.
Written by Justin Spear.
Rise.
Do you guys have any strong opinions on Rise?
This was the game that stuck out to me.
For the Xbox. The game that you wish you had.
Yes. Obviously, you got your Dead Rising, so that was a huge one. It was like, yo, I'm so invested in Dead Rising. I want to get that, obviously. But this was a new IP, a brand new game. And, you know, the last game we talked about, Assassin's Creed, was all about setting. It was a pirate game. We were sailing the open seas, which is awesome. Wow, a pirate game. And this, some Roman Empire, like gladiator type game? Yes, please. I know they'd been done before, you know, there's some PS2 ones, but this really felt unique and just a really cool launch game. It really stood out to me. And I was definitely across the aisle looking over jealously when Xbox launched, like, oh man, I really want to play that.
It's funny that you say that because I have such the opposite feeling to where there was definitely some impressive graphics, but I didn't feel like it had really any kind of unique identity to me. It just like, yeah, it's just some Roman-looking Romans, and I don't know what there is here that I really would care about.
But like setting and stuff is the first thing you judge a game by. For me, at least, it's like, yo, show this game. What is it? Boom, gut, immediate take on it. And it's like, yo, you're going to show me Romans just mutilating each other with next-gen visuals. Like, you have my attention. You have my attention, Rise.
Yeah. I'm kind of in a similar position as Bloodworth, where I feel like I've gone through my Rise arc twice now. And if you look at this game, like this is a 7-year-old game, right? It still looks good. This is still a visually impressive game. And if you go back and you watch the Microsoft 2013 conference, like it looks pretty awesome. That there's something about these soldiers lining up, putting their shields together and like marching through these arrows, and the city is on fire around them. Like visually, it's stunning. But the deeper you dig into it, and I think you can even see it in the footage of this review,
so much.
Like every combat encounter looks the same. Yeah. Like when he stabs a dude in the throat, you're like, oh, that's cool the first time you see it, but when you see it for the 100th time, you're just like, oh, this is gonna get like super boring quickly, isn't it?
I think Mike was right on like its presence when it's first shown. I think this is a great first game to show, or one of the early ones to show off how good the game looks. But Ben, I think you're right. Is you see more and more of it, it just becomes less interesting over time.
Right.
Yeah, and not only seeing it, playing it. I got to this game later when I eventually got an Xbox One, and I burnt out like halfway through. It's a really short game too, and I'm someone who probably less than 10 hours if I remember correctly. Pretty short game, and I'm someone who compulsively finishes games. It is my addiction. Like beyond video games is finishing them, and I was just not able to finish this because it just loses steam and is so repetitive just throughout.
It's something that I would love for them to take another crack at, I feel like.
100%. Like this laid the groundwork. Like I would love to give this series another shot, like or make a series out of this, like totally.
All right, the last game that we're going to be talking about in the Big Five, the one I am most excited to talk about, is the myth, the legend, the meme Knack. And unlike some of these other games, I have very strong opinions on Knack, as I know at least you do, Michael Huber, as well.
Yes. I really like this game. Admittedly, my love started as a joke, as a novelty, and it became real love. Like, obviously, before it came out, it was made fun of. It was the first PS4 game we saw. But then it finally came time to play it, and I fell in love, man. It's not the greatest game ever. Does it hold up? I can't really tell you, because I haven't played the first one in a while. But I grew attached to the characters. I grew attached to Knack, and it was like more difficult than I was expecting. It was a little more like hardcore. I was expecting just a easy breezy joke of a game like for kids or something, and it was actually challenging in some parts.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point that you bring up. It is more challenging than I think its visual style lets on, for sure. I definitely remember just repeating sections in a way that I was not expecting, for sure. Huber, I requested to review Knack. I was excited for it. I love, sort of like fun, jovial action games, cartoon platformers. I was really hoping that Knack would be an enjoyable ride. But actually, this is my review that we're watching. Revisiting my review, I remember why I really did not like Knack as much. I give this game a 5 out of 10. And you can see it in the footage. Like, it's just so boring. Pretty much in every level. Because, when you're running through an area, it's just tiny corridor after tiny corridor with secrets that like are staring you in the face. They're super obvious. And then even when you go into like slightly larger arenas, they're basically just squares. Like everything just kind of blends together and feels the same, regardless of the environment that you're in. And you're so limited in what you can do in terms of attacks that like, I say this in the beginning of the review, and I think it's totally true. Like, it's a game that feels longer than it is.
I will say, though, you know, all the games we've seen, especially Dead Rising 3 and Rise,
Sure.
you look at how gray and brown and serious those games are. And this game just has a jolly vibe. It's so warm and inviting. I know the combat is corridorian samey, but I still think the environments mix it up enough. You know, you have cities, you have jungles, you have cliffs and ice caves, and that is what really like grew my love for the game. Is just the variety of locations.
It's funny though that you say that, because for me, like it just like there may be like something technically impressive with the amount of particles and objects and stuff that float around on screen, but so much of the art style feels like one of those like $10 PSN games.
Yeah.
Like it really just doesn't feel like it's made by a team of people that have a lot of experience, and so it's really strange for it to be this like first party thing coming from Mark Cerny.
Yes,
and
I completely agree.
everything feels very generic. Like the character models feel generic. The environments feel like, you know, this is like somebody's first game. Like it reminds me sort of, Brad, of like when you did the review of like Aria and the Secret of Seasons. Like it's not quite to that level, but it's in that same vein in terms of the artistic style that's going on here.
It's like it with a budget, pretty much, or a high budget.
Yeah, but it's like even with a budget, you could make something that stands out, but like there's just something with the art direction that just doesn't feel like it feels like it's a bunch of levels rather than a really like interesting world. I don't know.
Blood, you are nailing exactly how I feel.
Yeah. I love the novelty of growing and shrinking too. Like the way you perceive levels when you're smaller or bigger. I thought that was a really cool novelty. Again, it's a novelty game that started out as a joke for sure and a meme for me, and then maybe I let my guard down, but I did really grow to appreciate it.
I gave this game an honest shake, Huber, and this game is just straight a novelty. It's a gimmick, man. It's like I gave up on this game like maybe halfway through. It was so boring, dude. Like I love like how Ben was saying, like old like 2D like kind of platformer, you know, going through stuff like that, but god damn this game, man. It just doesn't have anything to keep you going.
Yeah.
Once you play like a level or two, it's like that's it, man.
And doesn't it go on forever?
I have no idea.
It feels like it goes on forever.
Still compared to, you know, again, we're dealing with launch games. I still want to compare it to Rise and Dead Rising and how serious those games are.
Well, I think that's the thing about Dead Rising 3 is it's less serious than it seems at the outset. Right, and I think Knack is like less jovial and fun than it seems at the outset. So it's almost like the opposite problem.
Fair.
It's not what you want it to be. Yeah,
just nothing is offensive and nothing gets in the way of progression, which I really like. Like Rise has all the slow motion combat that just becomes exhausting. Like Knack is easy breezy, and I think that counts for something. It's an easy breezy, inoffensive game to get through, and it's one of the reasons I love it.
I thought you just said it was harder to get through than you remember.
Combat wise, but the quick load times, getting right back in, you still know exactly what to do, and in terms of difficulty, it's not like it doesn't make it hard to get through. It makes it challenging. There's a difference there. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess I know what you're saying, but I just like cannot agree with you.
So Huber, I want to challenge your pacing point by bringing up two examples. I actually think the game's pacing is pretty bad for a number of reasons. And one of those is like it'll have these cutscenes that just completely interrupt the flow of gameplay, where Knack just like jumps down a ledge, and it will take control away from you.
I remember that.
just for Knack to jump down a ledge. And so I wish it was more easy breezy in the way that you're describing. And I also want to talk about the story because, I mean, it's been a long time since I played this game, but I just feel like trying to pay attention to the story and just zoning out and just feeling like this completely boring plot was like going on way too long, and it was like giving an importance to the story that the story was not earning.
Totally.
Yeah, and I think we should be clear that like Knack 2 was a big improvement in like
it was
every
an atonement.
area.
Atonement.
I just remember sitting down at that demo at E3 and I'm like, guys, I think Knack 2 is actually good.
I think Knack 2 is better based on the full playthrough that we did. Still don't like Knack 2.
I skipped that playthrough. I hard out at that one.
Well, Huber, I have good news. We will be able to reevaluate Knack in real time because for our third and final segment of this episode, we will be experiencing Knack together and commentating as one of us plays it. We are putting our memories, our words to the test. The proof is in the pudding. Yes. We are actually going to play Knack and challenge our own opinions in real time. I thought it would be most appropriate if Michael Huber was the one holding the controller, so he will be taking us through this. But Blood, Brad, and I will be watching as Huber presses X on new game for Knack.
Mm-hmm. Look at that, dude. Bow and arrows?
Wow.
First problem, right? These orcs are using bows and arrows, and they're against guns. Like, this should be a slaughter.
And then
but they got tanks. They have tanks.
But they still have bows and hammers. They have tanks and hammers.
Don't question it. Cerny's intent.
I love the faces.
I don't.
You do?
I don't. Yeah. What do you love about the faces? What is it about the faces that's really getting here?
It's just got that like Saturday morning cartoon vibe, dude. The big noses. Look at that guy's giant nose.
Yeah, it's very like cartoon, I guess, in that sense. But that's about it.
I feel like it's got the like Saturday morning cartoon vibe, like on a hard budget.
I like the way Little Knack looks.
He's cute.
Yeah.
He's like
Little Knack.
Spherical little tummy. It's great.
Yeah. Reminds me of old Sonic.
The thing is, I don't think any of the enemies have the charm of Little Knack.
There's some of that Rise Son of Rome slow-mo.
Yeah, 2013, baby.
I love how you're attributing that to Rise. You were talking about the environments in Knack and how they're appealing to you. And, right, like, I am just using one example here, but this is so incredibly dull. Right here, there's almost nothing going on in the environment. Like the TV's cool.
I like that everyone's watching.
Yeah, there are some parts, but I do think Knack runs into this problem not just in this area, but like in the caves and stuff, where like you stop and there's not enough going on visually. And again, like it's not super fair comparing a game from 2020 to 2013, but like just playing through Crash 4, like you look in the background and there's so much happening, pretty much at all times. And I
totally. I get that.
But the monitors.
I think the monitors are cute.
I like the monitors.
Yeah.
The relics.
I love that too.
Yeah.
The dash and then how it takes a second for the relics to catch up. That's a neat effect.
Mm-hmm.
That I will say that double jump, that little flip that he does, it looks like it feels good to do.
It feels good. It feels good. I'm invested.
In the double jump?
I'm invested. These people watching you, I like the vibe. I like the vibe of it. Like I'm just some test subject.
You're a freak.
You know, what is that? Yeah, what does that mean? Like, who am I? What is my
Dude, does Knack ever say that in any of the games?
Who
am I?
He does say ice is nice.
I feel like he does.
So far, Huber, the look of the villains is the most appealing part for me.
Really?
Appealing?
Yeah, I like the way the goblins look.
Oh,
and these robots are pretty cool.
I don't know. I've got a garbage can on wheels running around.
Yeah, that could be nice though sometimes. Simplicity sometimes could be nice.
Yo, Blood, I want you to know the blood cuts are appreciated. That was perfect.
I mean, like R2-D2
That's
is a garbage can on wheels. And it looks awesome.
Like shrinking down like that, now we're in the pipings and the walls and stuff. I just love the shift of perspective.
So, all right, Hubert, if I was to take Knack and the enemy off the screen and I were to show you a screenshot of that area, would you be able to tell me what game it was?
Probably not. That is a great point. It's cool revisiting this because this, like, revisiting launch games, Ben, I love this idea of just, like, comparing this to
Crash 4.
you know, this PlayStation 4
Right.
exclusive at launch to something like Last of Us Part 2,
Yeah.
you know? Tracking the evolution of the entire console generation, I think
But
really
this is
cool.
a bit of a weird. Oh.
But I think that's why I wanted to play it, Blood.
Yeah.
Like, I do think Knack is kind of an anomaly, but I think that it being an anomaly is what makes it interesting.
Sure.
Look at his swagger.
That's true.
Knack
He has a surprising amount of
owns it.
swagger for some weird block man.
Okay, when I saw Knack's face up close right there, that was a little horrifying.
That grill.
Teenager Knack is the worst.
That was like, it was like a monster.
Adult Knack and baby Knack are the best.
These buildings, man, this garden, it gives me JRPG vibes, guys. I'm sorry. Like, I want to visit this town.
think-
I'm sorry.
I want to visit a shopkeeper.
Guys, I'm enjoying myself. I'm sorry.
I think you said the thing. Like, I no longer like JRPGs anymore. Like, you've taken that away from me, dude.
Jeez, dude.
This garden is a lot better
Yo,
than the
that
lab
holds up.
to me. And I like how the crystals
do
are among
like
the
it.
flowers. It's all right.
Ben, that's a great JRPG title name. Crystal Among the
Crystal
Flowers.
among the flowers. You need to add like an infinite in there. Infinite crystals amongst the flowers.
Right.
We need a semicolon.
You need a infinite crystals among the flowers.
Crystal Flowers
Secret.
Infinite Sunset.
Not so secret, but
Yo,
Hey,
secrets, dude.
Okay, but that was a complaint in my review, and it's holding true right now. Is like the secrets are so obvious, man.
What is that?
They're super
also
obvious.
like every one of them, maybe not every one of them, but a lot of them just feel like this same thing where it's like you
Look at
open a
that.
door and then you go down a staircase and it's right there.
Yeah, look
Yeah,
how obvious
come on,
this is.
man. Come
Hey,
on.
easy
Like,
breezy.
I'm not saying it's.
Easy breezy, man. Ben, they're easy. They're
breezy.
obvious, but they feel good to
But it also
get.
Yeah.
doesn't feel like
They
it
feel
makes
good.
any sense in a way.
Hubert, I feel like if I play it with you, I could enjoy just about anything.
He has a silver tongue.
He
in
does.
these
He
regards.
does. And, like,
Somehow.
you make me feel bad for being mean to this game.
No,
There's
it's
that same hallway.
it's got problems. Like, I'm not.
Oh, tight,
look at
dude.
that.
to-
Transmuter part.
Look at
Sick.
how lame that looks. Come on. Look at that transmuter part. It's
Yeah, so sick, dude.
There's just something easy breezy. Like, I keep going back to the easy breezy nature of the game. Like, there are so many challenging games, narratively challenging games.
oh my god, Hubert,
Technically,
you just
like-
made me think, like, they should totally do a Last of Us Part 2 parody with Knack. And I just want to see the advertisement be like it's a game about hatred and it's Knack's
Yeah.
face.
Yo, they're picking up cars.
I do actually
Whoa.
like when you're hitting these big guys, the way that they kind of bounce off you. I think that gives your hits some impact in a cool way. I'm into it. I don't know,
Is there a
dude.
secret here?
You might miss that one. You might fucking miss that.
Ben, is there a... I'm skipping
it's-
it
do you
out
think
of...
it's-
No, don't skip
Out of
it.
pro-
Do you
protest.
think some things could maybe be too easy and too breezy?
Right.
That maybe a little less
There is
breeze?
no breeze. There's no breeze there.
But still, if you take some hits, like, watch, one hit, look at that.
Yeah,
hits, you're
yeah.
dead.
It can be punishing for sure.
So yeah.
Thanks, Rise, for the slow-mo.
Oh!
Dude, vaporized.
Look at that. I love the load times, though.
What triangles?
Easy breezy. Like, it's crazy how fast this loads, and this was 2013.
Dude, can you imagine how fast Knack will
Like,
load on
this
PS5?
is a feature...
Dude,
It doesn't really have to
mean-
load. It's just this reset. It's already got.
don't question it, blood.
Look at this forest. Look at this showpiece right here.
It's
The
so
adventure
piece,
begins.
It's a straight path.
Yeah, Hubert, that's an extremely narrow, straight path.
Dude, the shadows, man.
But, like, yes, it's linear, but still, it feels big to
It
me.
doesn't
Like, you
feel
can see
big.
over there.
There's like a wall right on the other side of that line of trees.
Oh!
Explosion.
Yo, was that
Dude,
chaos
check the
energy
tape.
that bug had?
That was chaos
It
energy.
looked like chaos energy. That was unacceptable. Mark it down.
Give it the 5.
Our big debate
Then-
keeper was, you're like, it's a 6.
Yes. Dude, it is such a 6 at least.
This is kind of cool though, because you're spending a significant amount of time as a small little dude. You'll really feel it when you get bigger and have increased power. So that's something.
Look at that. You see down there? We were just there.
Oh shit, dude. Dark Souls.
Look at that perspective. Look at that.
Holy shit.
We came that way. I think my main point is that it's an inoffensive game.
You try to find the good in games, and I respect it.
A 5 is a game I usually find offensive.
Yeah.
Like, something about it really bothers me or is, like, annoying to play. I was never annoyed with
I
Knack.
was constantly annoyed with Knack.
It's... And I think that's why my arguing for the 6 comes for, Ben, as opposed to the 5. It's like... It's Knack. It's fine.
For me, 5 comes with like, so if I think of everything in terms of like emotional extremes, right? And so like 10 being like, genre defining, like a game you're gonna remember for all time, whatever, like that kind of thing. And a 1 being like, I hate every second of this, and I have to pull my hair out. 5 is just like, I feel nothing.
That is exactly what I was trying to convey.
Like, this game just exists.
That's it. That's exactly what I was trying to convey.
Damn, dude.
There
That's
it is.
cold.
So I think a good thing to bring up, Cooper, is with the 5, I was really trying to convey, like, I think this is mediocre, not I hate this.
Yeah.
But that's always the struggle you face as a reviewer, where I think sometimes the audience
totally
perceives a score differently than you perceive it, right? Where to a lot of people, like, oh my god, I got a 7, it must be terrible, right? And that's
Yes,
not
man.
what you're trying to say.
Right.
And I do think scores have been so inflated and so polluted that it can be really hard to fight
Totally.
against that tide sometimes. And you're like, no, I just think it's mediocre and I feel nothing.
That's such a good
I
point.
feel nothing.
I feel nothing. Dude, that should be Knack's.
That's a back of the box quote, dude, right there.
Game Trailers, I
I feel
feel nothing.
nothing. So this is cool because now you're one-shotting these guys, the big ones, and these guys are so
Yeah,
small.
that sense of power growth in a level is cool.
I would say Knack is the best mediocre game
The best mediocre game?
at launch. The best mediocre launch
Oh,
game.
you're whittling this down.
Let's go.
The best mediocre launch
Wow.
game on PS4.
Yes. For me, in the grand scheme of things, comparing it to all of video games, I think Knack is okay. It's like, you want to give it a 5, sure. Maybe I'd give it a 6. But I think it's important that it is a launch game. Like, I adjust my expectations accordingly. Do you think that's fair to judge it specifically in the realm of the past launch games and the current launch games for each system? Or do you think you should always judge it and review it just based on its own merits against all other video games?
I think
What do you
that's
guys
a general practice, right? I think people do use that defense every launch. They're like, oh, it's a launch game. Or like, oh, it's good, and I'm glad that I have to play this on my new system. I don't love doing that, though. If anything, I think the opposite should be true. It's like, you just gave this company hundreds upon hundreds of dollars to play their new system, and you're like, thanks for this mediocre game? No, no.
Good call. Good call.
It does happen, and I think in a lot of ways it's like trying to justify your own consumerism, but I think it should be the opposite of what it is. It's like, hey, make a case in your own library for why I should have this thing. Don't make me wait years, right? And that's what people always say. It's like, oh, games get good 2 years in, so don't buy it before then. And it's just like, it doesn't feel like it should be that way. Like, hey, if you're going to come out with this thing as a premium product, it should be compelling immediately. Like, that should be the standard I think that we're working toward anyway.
Totally.
And I don't know that it'll ever happen consistently, but I feel like that's what it should be.
You know, guys,
Oh, man.
I started out really, really high, really
Yeah.
strong.
Uh-oh.
I'm starting to
Yes!
feel a little fatigued.
there
And
it
you're
is.
not even close, Hubert. Like,
There it is.
It's starting to sound like, guys. Damn it! My mind is slowly being changed.
Thank you so much to Hubert, Brad, and Blood for doing this first episode of The Gen That Was with me. Hopefully you guys enjoy it. There'll be an episode covering every single year. This has been a ton of fun to work on. A lot of effort, but hopefully it'll pay off in the end with entertaining videos. But yeah, thanks everybody for watching, and we will see you in the next episode.
This is The Gen That Was.